Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah. A very good evening to one and all present here. My name is Aditya Krishna Rao, and I welcome you all on behalf of Public Policy and Opinion Cell of IIT Kanpur to this interesting lecture on contours of Indian foreign policy in post-COVID era. Today's lecture is being organized under an initiative of Ministry of External Affairs, India at 75, Videsh Niti Distinguished Lecture Series as a part of celebration of Azadi Ke Amrit Mahotsav. COVID-19 pandemic has caused drastic economic and social change across the world. The vulnerability of developed Western nations and the potential of developing nations in tackling this international crisis has led to changing world dynamics and world orders, which will give India an opportunity to present itself as a powerful nation in post-COVID world. To talk more on this, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Arvind Gupta, retired IFS officer and former Deputy National Security Advisor. He was the Director General of Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis from 2012 to 2014 and Joint Secretary at National Security Council Secretariat from 1999 to 2007. He has a vast knowledge and experience on issues of national security and international relations and has even published several books. Some of them include How India Manages Its National Security, which was published in 2018, and India's Foreign Policy, Surviving a Turbulent World, which was published in 2020. It is my honor to welcome you, sir, to IIT Kanpur, and I request you to begin with your lecture. I request all the participants, if you have any question, you can put them in chat and I'll take them up later. Please, sir.
Thank you very much, Aditya, for that introduction and for this invitation to interact with the students of IIT Kanpur. And I also want to thank the Ministry of External Affairs for organizing this interaction. You have waited for about 15 minutes, and I'm really sorry for that. I really do not know what is the reason why I was not able to join. But this is a good departure point for this lecture. That you may be sure about something, but it does not necessarily work out. And the uncertainty that is created it leaves you with your own devices, and you have to make sure that you do not give up. That is number one. And also that you have to do lots of jugaad. And in this case, I had to, apart from talking to Aditya, he gave me a new email and I had to call somebody from my office to help me and so on. And finally, we were able to join. But this is exactly what foreign policy is all about. Foreign policy of a country is a tool of engagement with the outside world. And you have little control over the outside world. And the foreign policy is normally there to help you to achieve your national interests, which are decided in accordance with the national priorities, domestic priorities. So in some sense, it is just an extension of your domestic policies. But since you are in the wild, that is in the outside world, and you are trying to engage with the other actors on whom you have little control, so you do not always get what you have planned for yourself. So that's where the diplomacy comes in. So sharper the diplomats, they try and help you maximize your opportunities and mitigate your challenges. So foreign policy for implementation requires very strong and deft diplomacy. At the same time, it requires a certain definition of national interest, clear definition of national interest. And it requires a whole lot of instruments of power backing you, whether it is military, whether it is economic, whether it is your culture, whether it is your soft power. So when we deal with the rest of the world, all these factors come into play. Now, you mentioned the COVID. The COVID has changed the world, as you all know, and you yourself mentioned, quite dramatically. But looking at the foreign policy aspect, what are the few changes that are standing out, and which I think I would like to enumerate a few of them. Number one, COVID has hastened or given a impetus to the trends which were already manifesting in the last 30 years, that of a changing world order. The world began to change quite dramatically after the demise of the Soviet Union 30 years ago. This year, in fact, we are in the 30th year of that momentous event. A new world began to emerge, but so far we do not have the clear contours of what this new world would look like. COVID has deepened the uncertainties, and three or four things that it has done. One is that today we are seeing the return of great power rivalries once again. It's almost as if Cold War 2.0 is beginning to now unfold itself. We don't know what shape it will take. Surely it will not be exactly like the earlier phase. But whether you call it Cold War 2.0 or you call it a return of the great power rivalries. Great power rivalries have always been there, but sometimes they go incipient, sometimes their edge declines. But now I think we are returning to an era where there is a sharp increase in the tensions in the world. And Ukraine is one example. All of you probably are following what is happening in Ukraine, where the traditional rivalries and the traditional tensions between Russia and NATO, they have resurfaced in a very big way. Uh, Russia has deployed, some troops, 100,000 troops on the borders of Ukraine, etc. So Europe is now shaken up. So that is one part of it. The other manifestation you are seeing is in Taiwan, which itself is a reflection of the rise of China. So this is the big trend of the last few years, that rise of China is the one that has, just one second, yeah. The rise of China is a major development of the last 20 years, and that is leading to a major rebalancing of equations in the world. And we have today a multipolar world, but again, in that multipolar world, some poles are stronger than the others. And there is a massive tension between the US and China. And China is challenging the world order that was set up by the US, and also the unipolarity that came in after the end of the Cold War and after the demise of the Soviet Union. So the rise of China has many manifestations. China wants to rewrite the rules of the world, but it has taken advantage of the existing world order. But essentially, it will not live with the hegemony. It will challenge the hegemony of the US. And in this emerging rebalancing, the new rebalancing that is taking place, Russia and China also seem to be coming together. And this has worldwide global implications, including for India. India is a rising power. India is also rising, but its rise is slower than that of, let's say, China. China may have even reached a plateau. In fact, its rise may not remain as fast in the next 20 years as has been the case in the last 20 years. But still, it is rising and it is very high. And it is also linked with what happens in China is linked with its internal domestic situation. So in this global rebalancing, India is also rising, but India has to find its place. And that is why you see Indian foreign policy has undergone a major revamp in the last few years, and also after the COVID struck. Now, what are the elements of this revamp? Number one, today we have shed our hesitations and dogmas of the past. Today we are happy to engage with the US, which we did not engage that uh, uh, deeply and intimately for the past 70 years, or rather 60 years, because we had some ideological issues. So today, ideology, the ideology of non-alignment that we had, etc., we have, uh, you know, uh, said goodbye to that. Instead, we are also now in the game of influence. And today, India's influence, thanks to the good economic growth and many other factors, democratic functioning, strong leadership, and a very talented population, young people, and so on. Our image is much better. Our economy today, we are the fifth or sixth largest economy in the world, and uh, in purchasing power parity, we are the third. We have the fourth largest army in the armed forces in the world. And we have, of course, several technical and technological advantages. So all these factors have helped India to grow. So India is not a pushover, and India is certainly an important player in the rebalancing that is taking place. This was not the case 20 years ago. This was not the case 30 years ago. Certainly not 50 years ago, where we were more like the takers of what was given to us. Today we are in a position to set the rules also, not exactly, but certainly contribute towards the shaping of the new rules. And that is because our comprehensive national power has grown, and it is likely to grow for the next 50 years, 40 years, 60 years, whatever. So that is, I think, one big change, and that is reflected in our foreign policy. That is number one. Number two, I think today foreign policy has a far clearer goals and a far greater ambition than was the case earlier. And this is again manifest and reflected in a series of measures that we have taken today in our foreign policy domain. And I will recount a few for you. Number one, a few years ago, we started improving our relations with the US. And the result today is that India and US are amongst the closest of the partners. So strategic partnership with the US has deepened quite considerably. And it is also taking now attributes of a security partnership. So the defense cooperation between India and US has grown over the years. We are members of the Quad, and the Quad is playing an important role in the Indo-Pacific. There is today, the US is our largest trading partner at about 140, $150 billion of trade. Our services sector is cooperating with each other. And there is a very deep connection between India and US. And of course, our diaspora is there. And all of you are very familiar with that. Many of you are headed to US at some time or the other. So I think the improvement in our relations with the US is a major change in our foreign policy. At the same time, we have now entered a phase where we have to take a new look at China. We tried and we set up in the 90s a certain framework for our relationship with China. We thought that India and China can work together and they will be an important players in Asia. But the Chinese game plan is different. China wants a multipolar world, but not a multipolar Asia. It wants to be the most important power in Asia. And that is what has now manifested in India, China tensions arising, and which were manifest in Galwan. And today, they unilaterally violated the framework or the agreements which we had signed in the 90s to maintain peace and tranquility on the border. And now we are in a totally new situation as far as China is concerned. And we have boycotted the Olympic, Winter Olympics. We have now, they have amassed a large amount of force on our borders. So have we. So, and then there is this Belt and Road Initiative. They are building roads through territories that is passing through Indian sovereign territory. They have a close relationship with Pakistan. So India-China relationship, which at one point of time seemed to be going in the right direction, but I think something happened around Doklam, and certainly very serious clashes took place in Galwan in 2020. So we are now in a different territory altogether. We have had very good relations with another great power, that is Russia, and we still maintain a very good relationship with Russia. But Russia's going close to China is also now changing the calculations. We want to maintain a good relationship with Russia, but how do we go forward will very much depend upon what happens on Russia-US relations and Russia-China relations. But in this whole process, we have also come close to Japan and Australia as members of the Quad. But this is related to a complete change in our outlook to the Indo-Pacific. We have now coined a new term, which is the Indo-Pacific. And we are looking at the connection between Indian Oceans and the Pacific Oceans. And today, our Act East policy, which was a manifestation of the Look East policy, which started in 90s. And Act East policy came when Mr. Modi came. And now it has been broadened into a much wider Indian Ocean policy and an Indo-Pacific policy. And we also have complemented a new element we have brought into our foreign policy, and that is the maritime element. So today we have very strong maritime relationships. Quad is one example. But we also have a policy called Sagar, which is security and growth for all, which is essentially a policy which is aimed at many of the littoral states of east coast of Africa, Mauritius, Seychelles, and also it includes many other countries in the Indian Ocean. And in the maritime sphere, our navy is also becoming stronger. So earlier, we were very much continental focused in our security, but today we also have a maritime dimension, and we are trying to balance between maritime and continental and taking it as a whole, because security is a holistic concept. And as a result of these changes, we are also now looking, our relationships with several countries have grown quite strongly. Africa, the east coast of Africa is one. We have very strong relationships in the making with the African countries, which is also part of our now our neighborhood, extended neighborhood. Our relationships with the West Asia and the Gulf, that have been completely transformed in the last 3 or 4 years. We are now looking at Central Asia in a very new way, and very recently, the Prime Minister had a virtual summit with the leaders of the Central Asian countries, because Central Asia is extremely important. And we are also focusing a lot on connectivity with Central Asia through Chabahar and the North-South Trade Corridor. So these changes are also come in our foreign policy. But we have not, we have looked at, under the rubric of neighborhood first policy, we have looked at our neighborhood, because neighborhood is ultimately the most important part of our foreign policy. Unfortunately, with Pakistan, which is a totally different country, our relationship is not very good. And we have to be very careful about Pakistan, about China and China-Pakistan, particularly after Galwan. And Pakistan continues to support terrorism. And although last year there was a ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan, but it has not led to any meaningful improvement in the relationship. So keep Pakistan aside for a moment. But with other countries, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Maldives, and Bhutan, our relationships have become very strong. And one of the reasons why our relationship have become strong, one is the neighborhood first policy, but also we are now beginning to change our outlook. And this is again, I think last few years it has happened. We are focusing a lot on building connectivity with these countries. So with Bangladesh, for instance, the connectivity has become very strong. We are now selling a lot of electricity to Bangladesh. The inland water trade routes, which were there, before India became independent, very flourishing, they are being restored. The road links have been restored, and a lot of transit facilities. Like we are sending heavy equipment, machinery through Bangladesh to northeast to build a power plant there in Tripura. Otherwise, which would otherwise take 1,700 kilometers detour, can now just go about 600-700 kilometers. So connectivity with Bangladesh is very important, and it is now fructifying. And Bangladeshis come to India in millions. About 500,000 visas we issue every day. So I think connectivity at all in all its dimensions is now improving. And with Bhutan, we are buying a lot of electricity from them, and which constitutes about 25% of their GDP. So much electricity we are buying. It's a small country, of course. And similarly with Nepal, railway lines are being built. A petroleum pipeline has been built, and there are within the focus of ages of BIMSTEC, connectivity is also being improved. Likewise with Sri Lanka, likewise with Maldives. So I think the neighborhood first policy is also becoming very important. So these are some of the important changes that have come about in our foreign policy. At the same time, I think engagement, we are also working as a multilateral engagement. At the UN, we are now in the UN Security Council, and we have been advocating a democratization of the UN Security Council for a long time. On the terrorism front, we have played an important role in the evolution of the global strategy, the counter-terrorism strategy of the UN. At the multilateral fora, various multilateral fora, we are talking about the issues which concern the whole world. The Prime Minister has talked about humane globalization. The Prime Minister has talked about the basic principles of the foreign policy, that being Vasudev Kutumbakam. That means we want good of all. Essential point is that India's rise will not be threatening, unlike that of China. India's rise will be a force for global good. That is the underlying motto of the Indian foreign policy. Vasudev Kutumbakam, being a force for global good and global cooperation. And so this is, I think, a very important element of our foreign policy. Another, I think, important trend that you see in our foreign policy is increasing focus on culture and civilization, which normally was missing in the earlier era. Today, when the Prime Minister goes, he speaks in Hindi. When the Prime Minister goes, he often quotes from the Vedas, which is our ancient civilization. He quotes from Tamil scriptures, he quotes from Odia, he quotes from so many other places, scriptures. So I think talking about the Indian civilization, a proud Indian civilization, that is, I think, another element. Then there is also a focus on the youth and the talent. That is very important. And the focus on technology has become so strong that it is visible in practically every speech that the Prime Minister makes. And on the technology front, I think the whole world is wooing India. There's a whole lot of foreign direct investment which is coming here, a whole lot of technologies which are coming here. And today, India, the Department of Science and Technology, for instance, has science and technology cooperation agreements with more than 80 countries. In the areas of artificial intelligence, in the areas of biotechnology, in the area of space, there are very big collaborations which are going on with the developed countries of the world. So this is, I think, another very important aspect of our foreign policy. And now we are seeing another trend, and which is that of Atmanirbharta. Atmanirbharta is coming, the self-reliance is coming into Indian lingo, whether it's domestic or foreign policy, in a big way. But Atmanirbharta does not mean that we are cutting off from the rest of the world. Atmanirbharta means we have to build on our strengths, domestic strengths, which we have not built earlier. If we build on our domestic strengths, where need we take help, where needed we give help. So the engagement with the world will carry on and go on. But we have to build our strength so that people take you seriously, so that your diplomacy becomes stronger. Atmanirbharta is coming gradually in our defense production because if you on the if a field of defense, if you remain dependent on imports, then that is a security risk. Atmanirbharta means what you did with the vaccines and with the PPE kits and with the various medicine that you produce. And the as a result of this, India was able to mitigate to some extent the misery that COVID had heaped upon many countries who did not have vaccines. So India has been an important player and a participant in the supply of vaccines to many countries. And this process has just begun. Health security today has become a central issue of global politics. And India, which is the largest manufacturer of vaccines, uh, children's vaccines, polio, and many other vaccines, is now all set to emerge and probably make even vaccines in the newer areas. I think biotechnology, which today is about $90 billion industry in the country, is set to grow and become $150 billion by about 2025. So that is the strength of India. So we are going to play on, of course, IT, you are all very familiar with. And in IT also, artificial intelligence and big data analytics and many other emerging technologies are going to become a standard fare of India's trade and more important, India's foreign policy, element in India's foreign policy and India's diplomacy. So these are, I think, some of the very, and now we have seen some very important steps that the government has taken, which is the privatization of the space industry. As you know, the private sector is coming into space in a big way in the West, but I think doors have opened now. Apart from the defense industry, I also Atmanirbharta in the space industry. We are Atmanirbhar in space for a very long time, but now the private sector is also coming in. Now this uh, step or this trend towards involving private sector in the self-reliance or the Atmanirbharta or Make in India program in various fields is a very big step. In 13 areas, we are today spending, I think, about 70, 80,000 crores. No, sorry, it's much more than that. About 3 or 4 lakh thousand crores but on PLI schemes, 13 sectors, which includes electronics. Today, in the electronics sector, our exports are beginning to increase. And we are probably very soon we will have fabs in India because some negotiations are going on. So, automobile was a major success. And automobile today is also like a computer. A car is nothing but a moving computer. So I think these changes that have taken place will also impact our foreign policy and our diplomacy. And diplomacy in turn will also facilitate these changes. So that is also, so technology as a part of our foreign policy, as an instrument of our foreign policy and diplomacy has emerged in the last few years. So I think you had asked me to speak about 30 minutes or so, which I have done. So this is a brief sketch of what all has happened in the foreign policy area, particularly after COVID. So to just summarize, just 2 or 3 short points. One, the world is changing in a big way, and there is a new world order which is shaping up. Contours are not very clear, but we are going to see a lot of uncertainty and tensions. Number two, India has lots of opportunities and challenges. Challenges are, some of these are not in our control, but I think given India's policies and given India's determination and the fact that India is rising, we will be able to have a lot of opportunities. In fact, I have written a book recently, which is called Opportunities for India in a Changing World. And I'll send you the link and you have a look at it, where I have identified what are the ways in which India can make use of these opportunities. Number three, foreign policy is a very important aspect of our overall policies. Foreign policy and domestic policy, uh, foreign policy is an extension of domestic policy, and foreign policy has undergone many changes, and there are many new trends which are today visible. So contours are visible. And in that contours, our relationship, all-round improvement in relationship with the great powers, in our extended neighborhood, in our neighborhood, in the maritime spaces, in outer space, and there are many other areas in which we are. India's foreign policy is a policy which, of course, is designed to achieve our own national interest, but also it is a strong India is an India which is a force for global good. And we, in our own foreign policy framework, give a lot of importance to the world is a family, cooperation, peace, etc. So ours is a non-threatening rise. This is very important, and this distinguishes us from the Chinese rise. Today, India is very well regarded in the world, and there are many countries in the world who would want India to play a big role. But in order to exploit these opportunities, we have to do a lot of things ourselves. We don't have control over external factors. We have to first make sure that we remain in democracy, our internal coherence remains, and we continue to invest in health and education, etc., because these are the building blocks of a rising India. We Nirbharta, Make in India is a way to go, but that is not does not mean that we don't engage with the world, and our engagement with the world will continue, but in this new framework. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for such an enlightening talk. I believe everyone who has listened to you today must have understood a bit more about the aspects of foreign policy on where India is targeting in future. And moving on, we'll take some questions that the participants have put in and some of mine. So you clearly mentioned the importance of neighborhood first policy. That I'm understanding that. So one of the important developments that happened recently was of Afghanistan. We all saw about the siege of Kabul and what all refugee crisis were there. But apart from that, that has emerged as a serious security threat in the subcontinent. And most of the responses from from world leaders from countries across the world has been for a diplomatic solution instead of a military intervention or something like that. How effective do you think that strategy is going to be, and what are its implications on India, the development in Afghanistan on India?
Afghanistan's the changes in Afghanistan are very unfortunate. The return of Taliban does not augur well either for Afghanistan or for regional security, and India is going to be impacted. There are two major impacts that India will have, that will be there on India. Number one, fillip to terrorism. Number two, radicalization. And I would add one more, number three, and that India's influence in Afghanistan will also be diminished. So we cannot work inside Afghanistan that effectively. So we will have to work around Afghanistan. But that is also the case with many other countries. It is a common challenge. It's not specific only to India. And of course, Pakistan and China, they are looking for opportunities in Afghanistan, which also creates problems for us. The strategy that we have adopted, one is that we have established some contacts with the Taliban soon after they came to power. We have supplied some humanitarian assistance, but we have not opened the embassy. And we are insisting in the framework of the UN resolution that there should be an inclusive government in Afghanistan, and that the rights of women and children and minorities should be respected. But at the same time, we are also coordinating our positions with many countries like Russia, US, Iran, Central Asia, etc. And this is, I think, the way to go. There is no, right now, there is no military solution to the Afghan problem. If had there been a military solution, 20 years, the US was there, spent trillions of dollars, but they could not achieve anything. So we'll have to see whether we'll have to wait and watch, and we have to see what happens within Afghanistan, because the return of the Taliban and the predominance of the Haqqani group does not necessarily mean stability in Afghanistan. Afghanistan could become unstable, and we'll have to be ready. And essentially, it will be a defensive approach that we have to adopt. Wait and watch, and make sure that the adverse impacts or the fallout of Afghanistan does not fall on us, or if it does, then mitigate it.
Thank you, sir, for that reply. There were several questions that are relevant to the other neighbor that we are having. And as you mentioned about the rise of power rivalries, and the predominant power rivalry that we have in Asia, that we see with our nation, is of India and China. It has been on the military front, it is quite evident, but also on economic and other development. So here's a question that one of the participants asked, that as China is expanding its assets in several countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Nepal, also in Africa and Maldives, how how our foreign policy and our ministry is dealing to counter this expansive nature of China, expansive nature of China?
That's a very good question. Look, China has uh, China. There is one thing that we have to understand, that we will have to catch up with China to be effective against China. There is no gainsaying that, which means that in the next whatever number of years, we will have to spend on our own resources, on our own growth. So growth is very important, and that growth has to be a wholesome growth. It should be in the economic growth is the most important, but at the same time, the improvement of socio-economic conditions, and more important, military. That is also, I think, very important. So in the long term, that is our medium to long term, that is our strategy, that we must become as strong as China is. But at the same time, we have to ensure that we don't get into a debilitating arms race, because right now there is a 1:5 power differential between India and China insofar as the economy is concerned. So we don't have to get into an arms race, which means that our deterrence has to be very strong. Deterrence means that we don't have to have gun for a gun, or a tank for a tank, or an aircraft for an aircraft, but we should have enough so that the enemy is adversary is deterred. So that we have enough. So I don't think there is any problem on that front. But of course, the quality of deterrence has to be improved all the time. At the same time, diplomacy will play a very important role. So our recent trends in our foreign policy of linking up with the US as a major defense partner, and also being a part of the Quad, but without really becoming a part of a formal alliance, and really strengthening our strategic partnerships with the countries which are also impacted by China, like Australia and Japan and the US, and now, of course, many European countries as well. So that is, I think, diplomatic instruments that we have started using, which is that of strategic partnerships. So we strengthen our strategic partnerships, and I think we should be all right. So China is not 10 foot tall. China is, and Chinese, let us also wait and see what happens within China. Xi Jinping is emerging as an authoritarian leader, and authoritarian rulers are often brittle. So China could also face certain turbulence. I'm not saying that China would collapse or anything of that sort, but China would also could face also certain turbulence. Their economy is also slowing down as compared to, say, what happened in the last 5 to 10 years. And in the brittle authoritarian regimes, a slowdown of the economy and the impact on the people could also create disenchantment and so on. And the Chinese are also following now something what we call dual circulation economy, which means their engagement with the world is also going to be impacted. The Belt and Road Initiative, you said they're investing in Africa and our neighborhood, etc. But that is a double-edged sword. because many of these investments have turned sour, and many countries, even Pakistan, Sri Lanka, they have turned into, they have entered into a debt trap, and they have become, it has become very difficult for them to sustain the Chinese loans. And Chinese are becoming unpopular, and even in Africa, even in Pakistan, they are unpopular. You see how many attacks have been there in Pakistan, particularly in Balochistan, on the Chinese engineers and so on. So I don't think the last word has been said on this rivalry, great power rivalry that has taken place. India and China are in for a long haul, and I think the relationship is going to be uneasy, and we should be ready for that. And we have understood it, and we will be able to deal with China, and there is no other option. And China is India of 2022 is not that of 1962.
An interesting follow-up question that Ashutosh asked here. Do you think that after the fall of Xi Jinping in China, will there be a similar crisis like what we saw during the fall of USSR?
Well, we don't know whether China is going to fall. I think it's difficult. I am only saying that there is enough evidence in the past, particularly from Soviet Union example, that there is a certain brittleness in such regimes. And even China has undergone a lot of turbulence during the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution arena. And even the 70s, for instance, was a very turbulent time for China. So, if economic growth does not keep pace with their see, every country is aspirational. China is aspirational, India is aspirational, and it is incumbent upon the leaders to fulfill those aspirations. So we'll have to see whether Xi Jinping will be able to fulfill those aspirations. But we must also distinguish. Xi Jinping may fall, but the Chinese Communist Party may bring some other Xi Jinping. That can also happen. But let us see. Right now, we are all eyes are focused on the upcoming Chinese Communist Party Congress, which is going to happen later this year. And Xi Jinping seems strong, but at the same time, there is also a lot of resentment against him in the party circles. So that's why there are a lot of purges, etc., that are taking place. But the system is so opaque, it is difficult to have a correct assessment. So one doesn't know what will happen. But yes, your question, if something big happens in China, obviously it will have repercussions globally, regionally, for China, for India, and for everyone.
We'll take a couple of more questions. Next question is about our as you rightly mentioned, our leading trade partner with us, America. This is a question comparing the two governments that we have faced in recent times, the Biden administration and the Trump administration. How do you compare these two? And I believe the motivation behind this, one of the factors was that asked, behind asking this question was the recent when the second wave of COVID hit and we requested for excess COVID vaccine to give to our. There was a sort of denial or a delay from the US administration that we faced. So, how do you compare the two administrations, the response of two administrations with respect to relations with India?
Look, I think we can see a certain continuity in Trump and Biden insofar as India is concerned. When Trump came, we were not very sure, how the relationship would develop. Trump was mercurial, he was uncertain, etc. But I think he recognized the what was happening in the U.S.-China relations, and he called China's bluff, and he discovered India's importance. And he, in fact, continued in a way what Bush and Obama had done. But certainly, the relationship did not suffer. In fact, it strengthened in many ways, and he was quite warm to India. When Biden came, now Biden is a Democrat, and Democrats normally have concerns about human rights and those kind of things, and they are not necessarily the easiest very easy people to deal with insofar as India is concerned. So India was again a little apprehensive about Biden. But Biden has also been very warm to India. And he has continued many of the policies of Trump. So I would say that let us see Trump and Biden as continuity. Insofar as US's India policy is concerned, there is a continuity and even a desire to deepen it further. So we should not see it as something that a big change has happened. A continuity is very much there. But of course, the Democrats have slightly different concerns and they are more concerned about human rights, etc., which was not really the concern with Trump. But important point is that for the last 20 years, the US has discovered that it needs a partnership with India to deal with the global issues and more important to deal with China. And the rebalancing which is taking place from towards Indo-Pacific, in which India is a very important partner. And it is to Biden's credit that he has given a lot of importance to Indo-Pacific, and that is why there have been two summit-level meetings, one virtual and one in-person meeting. And in that, I think he has given a lot of importance to India, and India-US relationship under Biden is also flourishing. So I would not see it as any break, but as a continuity.
I believe we'll take two more questions now. There's one question, just a minute. Yeah. Yeah. How Russia and China, like the next question is an extension here. Just a minute, wait. Okay. Okay, we'll take a different question here. So, as through this session also, we have been the Ministry of External Affairs has taken a step ahead in promoting visibility of India as a nation on media platforms and all that. How do you think that has helped the image of India across the nation, across the world? And what else apart from that can be done to sort of restructure or reshape the stereotypical image that India once had?
India's image is no longer stereotypical. Uh, al- uh, Earlier, India was seen as a poor country, as a country of snake charmers and an exotica, etc. All that is gone now. India is seen as a technology powerhouse. India is seen as a major economy. India is seen as a big marketplace. India is seen as a very strong culture. India is seen as a strategic partner. India is seen as an important player in the multilateral world. So I think India's image is much better and enhanced than was the case earlier. Now, of course, there will always be some people who would be concerned and worried about this, particularly our adversaries. And there is, in today's world, there's also what we call the information warfare, which goes on all the time, which is a war of perceptions, a war of narratives, a war which the adversaries use, and social media has come as a handy tool. We have to be very mindful of that because social media's reach is so much that, and a lot of fake news, circulates so very fast. Uh, so there are we have to handle this problem at two levels. One level is basically we have to remain true to our nature, which is of a democratic country, a country which is tolerant, a country which is diverse, a country which is, on the rise, etc. At the same time, we have to use our various other methods, public diplomacy, think tanks, our own media, our own social media, etc., to counter the attacks which are coming from from some of these quarters. So that is the game that we'll have to continue to play. But I think we should not over react also. Sometimes that's what they want you to do. One fake news and there is an overreaction from various quarters, and that is not that is counterproductive. So I think a certain proper assessment will have to be made: where to react, how much to react, how to react, what instruments to use, etc., and then react. So it's a game we have to learn.
Thank you for that answer. I believe we cannot take more questions. We have already exceeded the time. On a concluding note, sir, if you would like to say anything to the students of IIT Kanpur.
Well, you are amongst the brightest of the lot, so that's one great privilege that you have. There are two or three things I want to say. One is that we must take pride in our culture, in our civilization, and wherever we go, we should go as proud Indians, and we must study our civilizational history, etc. We must be uh, conversant with our history. A lot time, what happens is that people who are studying technology, science, technology, or some professional disciplines, they have not enough knowledge about history. So I think engage with history, or people who know history, read about it, read about our great thinkers, etc. India was a land which of contributors of ideas, those who contributed with ideas. And I think that is what we have to become today. And technology is one way to do it. That is one. Secondly, in India, we have, you are these days reading a lot about K-shape recovery, the rising inequalities, etc., etc. So, as people who are better placed in our society, I think we have a responsibility to those sections also. So we must always give back to society what we are getting from the society. So I think believe in India and work for goodness and work for the global good, work for our own people. I think that is what the simple message that I have for all of you. And in the process, read Vivekananda to start with.
Thank you so much for such an enlightening talk, sir. It was wonderful listening to you, and I believe all the students who are listening to you right now must have gained a lot of knowledge, a lot of knowledge and experience from you, and will definitely work towards the betterment of our nation, both domestically on an international level. I thank again Dr. Arvind Gupta, sir, for joining us for this session, and I thank Ministry of External
Thank you
Affairs
very
for
much.
helping us in organizing this session. Thank you all.